Nicole Mitchell, the Senior Knowledge Specialist at Dynata. She's been there since 1999. She's also a member of a POR in the research science team. Nicole is also working on her PhD. She's not only incredibly knowledgeable about research, but she's also a great friend. Welcome so much, Nicole. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
I gotta be me. That's gonna be my presentation. So it seems like an easy statement, right? It's easy to proclaim, but for a long time, I didn't know how to be me. It was not easy to get there to the point that I was comfortable with me. So basically, what I'm going to share is a short story or journey of how basically I'm talk about why I wasn't okay being me and how eventually I became comfortable in my own skin. And then, identity. So basically, let's just start off with like what defines us, and that's our identity. And our identity consists of characteristics and other things like affiliation. So physical characteristics we think of when we think of identity are like height, hair color, eye color. And then you have your psychological characteristics like your personality traits. And when you think of personality traits, think of like introvert or extrovert, or if you're somewhere in between that. And then interpersonal basically is how we relate or communicate with others. And then there's the social groups that we belong to, like certain ethnicity or cultures. And then finally, we have our social roles and that we subscribe to, like being a market researcher. So when we think of struggles with identity, we typically think of teens trying to find their like sense of self. But it's not always teens or young adults. For me, it has always been a struggle. When I think about my journey, it reminds me of a show called Resident Alien that I've been watching. And the main character, he imitates the behaviors of humans so he can behave like them. So he's trying to disguise, he's walking amongst humans, and he's trying to disguise himself from being an alien, actually being a human. And this is what I did for a long time before I became comfortable with being me. So I would observe my colleagues and I would mimic their behaviors when presenting in social situations. But of course, that felt performative and authentic. So why did I do this? Next slide, Kai. So it's because when I walk into a room, these are the characteristics that are visible to others, and which are I'm a woman, I'm Black, I'm gay, and gender nonconforming. And when I say gender nonconforming is that I don't present how society would dictate how women present, right? I wear men's clothes. I like a button-down shirt. I'd wear a men's blazer, that type of thing. And that's just part of how I feel comfortable. And so, but of course, there's social norms dictated for each of these different characteristics. So when for women, you must dress a certain way to be taken seriously in terms of, business situations, and that you also have to behave a certain way, right? You don't want to be seen as too aggressive because then you get the label of bossy. And this is also true for Black people. You have to watch your tone because it could be mistaken as aggressive. So these immutable characteristics, being a woman, Black, gay, and gender nonconforming, are things that I can't change that are innate to me. And they have so many rules, and I try to conform to the rules. But slowly, I just started to respectfully defy the norm, all the way to cutting off my locks. If you've known me before, I've had long locks. And part of the reason why I had locks is because I held on to this idea that I couldn't possibly wear men's clothes and have short hair, right? Because what would people think of me? What would they, think about, the person that I am? And so my journey, was slow, but I finally got there, right? I finally got to that point where I felt comfortable as me, or so I thought. So I was at a conference and I was in charge of leading group discussions regarding asking the race ethnicity question. And so it was great conversation. And a lot of people came up to me afterwards and we continued on the conversation about race, ethnicity, intersectionality. And there was an individual who came up to me that identified as non-binary. And we talked about race, ethnicity. We also talked about, our own like kind of similar experiences. And the person had actually said to me that they had stopped going to conferences because they felt that there was this expectation, and because they didn't fall in line with that expectation, they stopped going and participating. And so this opportunity, this conversation was great for me, right? Because I felt heard, I felt seen. We've had similar conversation, we had similar experiences, and not only that, but because of being able to present as myself and lead these group discussions, and people coming up to me afterwards and continuing the conversation, that gave me a feeling of belonging, right? So I felt like I'm a market researcher, like I belong in this space. Well, forward to later or the next day, I was getting ready for a panel presentation that was going to happen, that we were bringing in people that are online survey takers, that are part of our panels and part of other panels as well. They were going to get up on stage and talk about their experiences as respondents. And there was a person from the industry that came up to my boss and I, and they started talking to her about how they're excited for this discussion and how it's important for the market research industry to, hear what it's like to be a respondent. And the person turned to me and said, "So how long have you been an online survey respondent?" And I was floored, because in that immediate time, he did not see me as a fellow market researcher, right? And there's nothing wrong with being an online survey respondent. I have a lot of respect for people who take our surveys online, and we all should be taking our surveys and getting that experience so that we know what respondents are going through. But in that moment, it kind of negated all of the belongingness, all that feeling seen and heard. And it left me it set me back. But I tell you that story to say that setbacks will happen, right? Well, they'll happen. But it's important to not let those experiences define you, right? I think it's important to process the experience, but never stop being you. And next slide, sorry, Kai. So before we go into breakout rooms, my question for you, or really exercise, is for everyone to kind of mention one or two things about you that people don't see when you walk into a room and why they are important to you. And so just a couple of things about me that people don't see when I walk into the room is that I'm a fanatic, right? I love Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, Harlem Comic-Con, Flame Comic-Con, the cons I'm in, I'm all in. I haven't been to San Diego Comic-Con yet, but it's on the list. I'm a Harry Potter fan. I'm a huge football fan. My team is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm a knowledge seeker. As Kai noted, I'm going to be starting my PhD in the fall for psychology, because one of the things that drives me is I love observing people and trying to figure out their behaviors and thinking. And then I'm a dog mom, right? We have two dogs. Oso, who's a Pomeranian Chihuahua mix. Unfortunately, he passed away yesterday at the age of 10. And then we have our puppy, who's a little over a year old, Rainbow, who's a Pit Chihuahua mix. So with that, I want to say thank you. Next slide, please. And I want to say from Tabitha Brown, have a good day. And if you can't, don't go messing up nobody else's. And that's me.